Conversations
in nature.
close to the yurt in nature, because the yurt is too warm. That's what it is. Let's see if this thing is recording even with us on. Yep.
It's gone live.
We are live in/outside the yurt.
I just want to say, like, super nice to be in person, Torbjørn.
Are you?
With you.
You wait to say that until we're on recording?
What do you mean?
How convenient.
I said that to you when you first got here off the train. It was really nice, and I'm just happy to be here in person. And
yeah,
it is a different energy when we're here in real life than behind the screen. So very cool. Very excited for this conversation. How are you feeling, Torbjørn?
Yeah, it is a different energy, but also with you, I feel like like we're very relaxed at each other's company, so it still feels very much the same in a way. This is just like in HD. There's more
3D
detail. Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's a very good point. And you were saying just before we jumped on this podcast or conversation, you were saying this about, like, that when we're together, then you get these ideas or get, like, kind of creativity, or you get
right.
And I was saying to you, like, okay, what is the difference between me and another person in your energy field, or being together with you? What is that? Can you shed some light on that, Torbjørn? Because I'm always confused. My mind's always confused when you say that.
Well, but you're humble, right? So you're not really aware of how special you are because you are as humble as you are. Maybe that's a good thing, you know? Maybe that. But it makes me think about, like sometimes I tell this story when I meet other people who are, like, different or special like we are. And I tell them about how when I was young, I always thought I was a really boring person, because whenever I was talking to someone, I would never have anything interesting to say. And I would sit across from someone or with someone or in a group, and just nothing, I would have nothing to say, nothing came up. And I started to conclude that I was just kind of a boring person. And, you know, that's what that is. Couldn't do much about that. But then one day I met an interesting person. And then instantly suddenly I had, like, funny jokes, I had humor, I had things I wanted to talk about, things I wanted to say. And that's when I realized that input and output are connected. Receiver and sender are connected. So if you're disconnected from other people, then this isn't the case. If you're disconnected from other people, then you might meet, like, a professor or someone who just, one of those people, or like a weird uncle. They start telling stories, and the person who's listening isn't really interested.
Yeah.
Right. So people who are disconnected, they can say anything to anyone. But someone who is a little bit connected to themselves will start to feel connected to others. And what happens is then that they're not going to have things they want to say that the other person can't understand or receive. So there's a connection. It's kind of like, because what's really happening between people is energy is being exchanged. And I'm not too sharp on this natural sciences stuff, but as far as I understand, electricity moves between a minus and a plus pole, right?
Yeah.
And for electricity to arise, there has to be both poles. Electricity is not going to arise just if one pole is there. So just like electricity arises when there's a plus and a minus pole, ideas and conversation and energy arises when there are two people who can share some of it. So when I'm talking with you, I always say that you can understand me in ways that most people can't understand me. And you say, well, how do you know that? Why do you say that? What is special about me? And I say, well, when I'm with you, there are all these things I want to say, and I don't want to say them when I'm with anyone else. They come up because you can receive them. And when I then do say them, this is the proof. When I do say them, I see that you understand it, and then we have a conversation about it.
Like we're having right now.
Like we're having right now, yeah. So
and something that comes to me when you're saying that, actually, too, man, is this with like a...
It's so weird to have you right here when we're talking. I'm so used to having a screen.
Yeah. I'm also I noticed I'm like seeing you behind the screen.
Yeah, it's like a little weird.
It is, isn't it?
I have to get used to it.
I'm like, hang on a second, what's going on?
Yeah, this is very real right now.
Yeah. It's interesting to notice that as well. Notice like the weirdness, or notice like how we're sitting and like that it's not a screen.
Yeah.
And something that kind of came up to me, within me when you were saying this, is this with like the frequency kind of thing. So just as like a radio has a frequency and you dial into that frequency, it's like when we're together, our energy or our frequency is dialed into each other, and so we're able to kind of understand each other or hear each other, or maybe me understand you, and vice versa. And it's like that with a lot of people.
I very much understand you as well. You're speaking right so that I understand it.
Yeah. And it's like with most people in our life, when we meet somebody, we can straight away feel within ourselves, like whether you can, feel like you're on the same frequency or not.
Yeah.
And it's just amazing when you do, when you are with people that you kind of vibe with, or you're on that frequency, the aliveness or the energy or what comes up, like you said, when we're together, is quite kind of beautiful and quite special, because it's coming from a certain intelligence, you could say.
Yeah.
It's coming from a layer within you that maybe you don't get to kind of express all the time, you could say, or with every person, because some people just don't get it. Or some people you would say this to and they'll just be like, what planet are you on? Like where, like who, like what?
Yeah. Some people don't understand us, but some people will like shame us or attack us if they don't get what we're saying. Because some people don't like it when we don't play into their expectations.
That's just up to them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's and sometimes, and when you really feel a disconnect, sometimes you meet people and it's almost even obvious to other people that you can't talk together. Like whatever you're saying, they don't understand it, and whatever they're replying, you don't get it.
Yeah.
And it's such a struggle, because you're
missing each other, like completely missing, and there's very little feeling in that, or very little kind of like connection, or like kind of you feel like you can't really be yourself, maybe, or yeah.
It's usually because that's actually a good point. You can't be yourself. It's usually because the way I experience it when in such a conversation is that there are certain things of myself that the other person don't want me to share. So I'm like, they have certain things in themselves that they have a hard time being with, like emotions or thoughts or whatever. And since I naturally represent those things, because I'm normally just feeling and thinking whatever I'm feeling and thinking, then it becomes this weird negotiation between someone who doesn't want too much of what you are, but at the same time you're trying to get something past the filter that each of you have and get something through or whatever.
You said something off camera before about when somebody is not willing to go to that place within themselves, within that emotion. Maybe it's painful, maybe it's just something that's, I don't know, that they have some history with, and then they're just not willing to go to that place. Is that kind of like what you're talking about now? Or?
Yeah, I think for a lot of there may be people who just don't have the capacity to meet you on a certain level. That's possible. I don't know entirely about that, but there are definitely people who don't want to meet you there because it requires them to go into things that they find unpleasant or scary or painful. There was a girl, I started talking to a girl or a woman 8 or 9 years ago, and I came to start like helping her with some spiritual questions and all that stuff, and she was very religious at the time. And through our conversation, she had sort of a breakdown at one point, which wasn't intentional on my end or her end, and she stopped talking to me for like 3 years or whatever. But what we found out, we're still talking today, and she's come very far since then. What we found out was that she used the religion to stay away from like a really, really huge fear she had. Like she had so much fear inside because her, what had happened in her past had created such a fear of dying and death. And religion was her buffer between her and that fear. So when I started to question her religion, her religious beliefs, she reacted very strongly to that, and she eventually had a sort of a breakdown because the buffer came down and then all the emotions hit her. And in the long run, that ended up being a good thing, but at the time she thought that I was the devil or something, and she kept her distance. And then after some years she came back, and she's not religious anymore now, she's spiritual instead. But that was very much an example of how we have certain buffers that keeps us away from certain things that we have a hard time facing, and those are also the ones that keep us from being able to communicate with others. And
these blockages within ourselves, because that's what I hear from you. Like there's
like
certain barriers and certain blockages within our in our body that we're just kind of like is a triggering point or a pain point.
Yeah.
And the beautiful thing about what we do with therapy and stuff like that is that it really provides that space for people to actually start leaning into these pain points, into these blockages, or giving space for them. And yes, at times there's a lot of emotion and a lot of release and a lot of kind of letting go of some of those things and becoming aware, and also letting go and freeing up yourself and your being to kind of to live and to express and to kind of and to interact differently with these emotions. And that's, I mean, what a gift.
Yeah.
What a gift it is to be with you here today, Turan. So happy we're doing this.
I'm so happy you told me earlier that you're like, oh yeah, I could take a nap right now. Because like, I remember, and then we talked about it, then you did it, and you took a nap, and now you have more energy. Like, why wouldn't people do what they needed to do with their friends?
Yeah.
I remember I was...
Or just in general, right? Like.
Yeah, be natural.
Yeah.
Like I was going to a party with some work colleagues some years back, and I was like, we were in the car, and I was like, we were starting pretty early. We're gonna, drink and stuff. And I was like, I might take like a 30-minute nap or something before the party starts. It was like 4 o'clock or something.
Yeah.
And like, what? You can't do that? And it was like, one of them was like, oh well, okay, it was a little weird, but you can do it or whatever. And I was like, that is such a strange world we live in. Like, if someone is tired and they need a nap before a party, and there's plenty of time, whatever, then we'd rather not do it because if we imagine that it's weird or whatever, and the person might be tired all day because they needed the nap, and everyone's fun is reduced because the person isn't allowed to just do what they want. Or the person could just take the fucking nap, and people could, like, it's such a weird world we live in sometimes.
Yeah, there's so much thoughts around what other people think, and about kind of living within what other people want, or like what their needs are and things like that, instead of just kind of being with people also that you can just express yourself and be yourself and just say honestly, like, I'm pretty tired right now, pretty wrecked, I just need to have a nap. And then now we're here having this conversation, and there's a lot of energy that's kind of come up from that. So it's like, I mean, and the cool thing with that is that when we allow ourselves to just express and to be who we really are, we feel very different about being in the energy or being with the person or being in the environment that we are, because we can just kind of be light with it and be ourselves and just kind of live.
Yeah, that's one of the other reasons why I find it so easy to communicate with you is like I told you, like I was thinking about like, oh, I should do like a podcast in Danish or whatever. Who would I do it with? Because then I could do it with someone else, and it could be, because I already do a podcast with you. It would be fun to do it with someone else as well. That people are interesting. And we were talking about that, and I was like, I told you, but I don't know anyone who can tolerate silence. Like I don't know anyone who can, like you and I do, is like, okay, if we have a minute or 30 seconds or whatever, and no one's saying anything and no one has anything on their mind, then we're both okay with just letting the silence be. Because silence is intimacy, and we're okay with having that intimacy together. And because of that, no one is scared. No one is sitting there thinking, oh no, what should I say? That sort of fearful, anxious energy. And that energy, if that energy is what drives conversation, then the topic is always created by fear, and that's not going to be it's not a good energy. So for someone to actually, for good conversation to arise, it's necessary to have two people who are, or at least are willing to lower their guard enough to be able to be silent together. Because silence is such an interesting thing, because
it's vulnerable.
People think that we communicate when we talk, but that's not true at all. Most people talk to avoid silence, because when you become silent, then the borders between two people start to disappear, and you start to feel each other. You can feel each other's emotions. You can start to sense each other's thoughts.
Can I just say something with that?
Yeah.
I was talking with somebody actually just yesterday, and they kind of said to me, like, how do you do therapy with like Danish people in English when it's about talking about emotions?
Yeah.
And what I said to her I said to her, well, actually, from my experience with doing therapy with Danish people, it actually works very well, because the speaking part, or the talking, like putting a word around an emotion, is only one part of what is actually going on underneath that emotion, and the work that we're doing together. Yes, it's like it's talking. It's effectively called talk therapy, right? So you are talking, but there's something else also going on underneath that, and that's like, I'm reminded of that when you're saying right now that communication is only, or talking communication is only one part of the emotion, and actually the emotion is what is going on in your body and in other person's body, and that space in between that as well.
Oh yeah, that's what you were talking about earlier, but like the woman, the interpersonal. What was it?
Yeah, so I've been doing this ACT, acceptance and commitment therapy training program. It goes for like 2 years, and there's all different kinds of people who are like specialists in the ACT world. And there was this lady called Robin Walser, absolutely brilliant person, and like a very, very like kind of what she calls her like book, for example, Act from the Heart, and that's a great, I think, reflection of she does this type of therapy, but within that there's this whole kind of this whole experience of well, actually, from doing the training with her, right, we did a lot of role plays and a lot of things like this, and what she talked about was this thing called intrapersonal process, which is really what's going on in my body as the therapist. So what are my emotions, what are my thoughts, what's happening within myself, and being aware of that. And then what's happening in the other person, in the the client or the patient, and then this interpersonal process. So what's happening in between both of us, and this thing going on in between us. And then, it's super interesting because I was like, we talk about this. We do this together, you and I, Torben. And here's this specialist kind of like putting different words around the same thing. But essentially she's talking, she's talking about, like the communication happening from your emotion or from your stomach and from your with the other person, and this intuition or this
you're tuning each other like an instrument. Like I went on a rant on one of our first episodes and you just completely checked out because you didn't know what I was talking about. But in one of our first episodes I talked about transference, which is what I call it.
Okay.
Which is what I said when I was working with clients, the real work was happening beneath what we were saying.
Yeah.
Our bodies were tuning each other, and my body was tuning theirs back to a more healthy setting, so to speak. And that's an energetic sort of exchange.
So can I just try and understand this, and also for the people listening, like
you do understand it already?
Yeah, but what do you mean by that? Like, is it kind of like, are you kind of like saying that you're tuning the other person by energetically coming to a certain level so that they kind of come up to that? I don't know, like what is it that you're...
It actually happens automatically. It's like when we talked about earlier, it's the same thing again with energy and with availability. You cannot do it to someone who doesn't want to do it, but if someone wants to be healed, but they come to you and they're open and they say, I want to get better, what do I do? Well, we're going to be talking about some stuff, and there's going to be some wisdom, there's going to be some exercises, like you do.
Yeah.
But a great part of it is because as a therapist, if you've done your own work, then you are at a certain vibrational level. And the greatest part you can do, and that's why you can never help anyone who is, if your vibrational level is not higher. The greatest part you do is if they trust you, then they allow you to raise their frequency, and that happens automatically just by talking and being open. You don't have to talk. You could be sitting next to each other and do nothing. It would still happen if you had someone who was open to receive and someone who was open to send, right? And it's the same friends do when they're meeting over conversation. Good friends give each other energy. If someone is down, then they talk and the other one feels. It happens all the time. It also happens the other way around. People take other people's energy, and you've got energy vampires, and But
this is what you're talking about at the start of this conversation, this giving and receiving, this frequency thing.
Right.
And even just being in this space with somebody that you're like can be enough sometimes to raise that frequency within that person if they're available and open for that.
Right. That's the purpose of like satsang with like spiritual masters. You come there and you sit with them, and then they may say something, maybe they don't, but it's really to raise your vibration, right? So
we want to invite you to come and vibration.
Come sit with us.
Come sit with us. But isn't that interesting that like people come to therapy to get fixed, or get like, I have this problem, I want to fix it.
Right.
But a lot of the time in therapy, it's not like saying like, okay, now I'm going to fix this thing. It's actually kind of like somewhat the opposite of that in a way.
Yeah. Yeah, you never fix the
ironic.
thing, you fix the person.
Maybe the person fixes themselves. Maybe the person actually already has the things within themselves. It's just about creating the... where am I going with this?
You're going far out, baby.
Going far out.
I think you can...
Maybe the person actually has the answers within themselves. It's just about leading them to be able to kind of get to that place where they are able to kind of see those answers, or trust themselves enough to see them and then act upon those things within themselves. Because actually within us all, we have so many layers of ourselves that most of the time we're not even aware of, because we're just coming from our mind and we're coming from reacting from our thoughts or our emotions. And underneath that, there's this whole other part of us that when we're able to kind of tune in, able to listen to, able to come from, then a lot of other things can kind of, like a ripple effect, can change in our lives. Like when you put a stone into the pond and there's a ripple of effect out from there. This stone is our self, our center, and when we're able to connect to that source, everything else starts to shift and change from that place.
Yep, I would say that's completely true. That's it. There isn't much more to it, and you can have different perspectives, but sometimes the way I see it is that when I help someone, it's really the universe through me helping the universe and the other person back to the universe and them. It's kind of God fixing God in the form of God and God.
Wait, hold on a sec. Okay, you went from universe to God to this to that. Like, just slow down a sec.
Well, it's like, but that's also like, you know, I give people some strategies and some wisdom or whatever. But the main thing is I tune people up to a vibrational level where, as you say, you already said it actually, you said it perfectly. I always say my job is done when the other person feels that they can competently sort out their own problems by trusting their own intuition. When they trust themselves and they trust that they can fix their problems, then I'm done. Then they reach a vibrational frequency of optimism, and they've reached a trust level in their intuition, which is where it starts to be actionable, and they can take action from it. From
that place.
Right. So when they believe that they can make a difference, and when they trust in the thing that can make them make a difference, then don't have anything more to do. So I'm never really.
But come on, Turin. There's always another level. And you know that in your own life, in your own kind of work with yourself.
Yeah, but I'm not trying to make people see the universe in its purest form. I'm usually trying to get them to be able to just live their lives.
Why not? If somebody could through you have access to that, why not give that to them? Because they're not ready, or because?
Well, first of all, because I'm not at the level where I can do that yet. Because that's not where I am. Like I am a seeker on the path, and I can teach other people to be seekers on the path. So I generally teach people stuff that I've already mastered. And life for me, sorting out life, feeling yourself, having healthy boundaries, having healthy relationships, that's not a problem for me at all. That's easy. It's just listening to yourself, taking action, trusting yourself. So I have complete mastery over that part, so I teach people that. I don't have complete mastery over the spiritual part at all. I just know some things. And so I don't really attract those kind of people, because I can't lead them there yet, so to speak. But the small stuff is easy enough. Because what I can help people with is trusting themselves and
releasing.
Yeah, releasing,
trauma,
letting go, all these things. I can help people with that part. Yeah. I can help them live well, but I can't necessarily help them, go beyond the veil.
Not yet.
Not yet. We're getting there, but not yet.
Okay.
That's a work in progress. But to teach people about this wonderful thing, that the more you become aware of your emotions and your thoughts and your actions and your body, the more you start to understand yourself, everything about yourself. Why do certain things happen? What drains your energy? What gives you energy? What's good for you? What's bad for you? Who should you spend your time with? Who shouldn't you? What should you be doing with your life? Why do these things keep happening? The greatest gift that I can give to anyone is that of awareness, is that, start looking at what's happening in your life, what's happening inside you. Why will you let anything happen inside you without you seeing it? That's like having a department run when there's no leader to oversee what's going on. Then the longer that goes on, the more it just becomes chaos.
And it becomes chaos because you act from your emotions or thoughts or mind.
Yeah, because there's no higher perspective. Right? It's the people on the ground are expected to take decisions that can't be seen from their position, right?
And
it's like having a guy on the ground trying to lead the helicopter, but you can't see anything from there.
Unless he's got like a remote control with a video on the top, like a drone type thing.
Right.
But then even then he can...
Thanks for destroying my metaphor.
But even if it is that way, he can then still see it from the perspective from above.
Yeah.
So it definitely does. So how would you guide people to see from that place, to be the leader of their department, so to speak, or their mind or their emotions or their thoughts?
How would you?
How would I?
Yeah.
Well, we talked about this earlier, right? And at the core of it is like understanding, or not even understanding, actually just noticing or observe. Like people, different words: noticing, observing. It's more or less the same thing, of being able to come out of, well, not out of yourself, but able to notice your thoughts or your emotions or your body or your sensations or what is going on within your being, from a place of distancing, basically. That's and ways of doing that is just, by going from the place of like I am this thing, like I am I don't know, what would you say?
I am the emotion. I am angry.
Yeah, I'm angry. I'm frustrated, or I'm sad, or whatever it is. To this thing of like I'm noticing that I'm feeling that anger. I'm noticing I'm having that thought, and that's I guess like the initial part. Maybe you can add some more layers onto that.
Well, you said something interesting earlier. If I can, you were talking about being stressed. Can I?
Yeah.
Share some. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you were saying like, oh yeah, I've been a little stressed, and then I've been noticing that I've been stressed for a while, and then I discover later on that I was stressed, before. And it's just an interesting thing because whenever you start to observe yourself more, you'll invariably have this experience, and that is that first you'll realize a week later that you were an idiot that day, and that your anger was controlling you, right? And then it'll take 6 days, then it'll take 5 days, 4 days, 3 days, 2 days, 1 day. Suddenly, you'll realize it 16 hours later, 17 hours, 18 hours. Suddenly, you realize it 1 hour later, 30 minutes later, 10 minutes, 5 minutes later. And with enough time, you'll start to realize it while it's happening. You might not be able to stop because you're still taken, but a part of you knows this is not good.
Mm.
And then at some point, you get to the very, very, very exciting point where you start to realize it before it happens. And that means your awareness is in your mind ground, so to speak, before the emotion arises. So as the anger arises, you're like, oh, there's anger. And then you don't get involved with it. because now it's just a thing in you, whereas before it was you. So
can I just
yeah. Go.
I just want to, and you can keep going. I'm kind of reminded of this. I was doing this, meditation retreat thing for like 8 days or something like that.
Yeah.
Indo-Buddhism thing. And in that, they did this exercise thing where you're like imagining yourself as the ocean. And from the perspective of the ocean, you're like looking up at the waves, and each wave represents like a thought or emotion. And some of the work that we're doing within that exercise was to notice or observe the wave before it crashed, before it kind of like came down. And so observing
Jesus Christ, what a metaphor. Holy shit, I would I would fail already at that complex visualization exercise. Like, holy moly.
But with what you're saying, like observing it or being like it in your awareness before it actually crashes.
Yeah.
And so the wave represents like, when it crashes, it's like, I'm doing a probably a botchy job at this.
No, you're doing it great. It's just, I just find these really elaborate visualization exercises just like poor people like me who can't visualize. Like, imagine the ocean, now imagine the waves on top of the waves at the bottom in the sky, and you're like, what the hell is going on here? I can't.
You're basically just observing the wave before it crashes from the ocean.
But it's emotions instead.
Yeah, or emotions or thoughts, whatever you want.
Right.
Yeah. So anyway, I've just gone off on a tantrum about this. I'm like, this could be really helpful, and then it just ends up being...
No, what you said was perfect. I'm not laughing at you. I'm just laughing at like this.
All right.
Just idiot. Yeah.
Continue going. Continue. Sorry.
No. So yeah. So
you come from that place of...
yeah. So your point was that you'd done an exercise where you were supposed to try and observe it before it happened, right?
Yeah.
Or before it crashes.
So the crash is like...
And what does crashing mean? What does it mean in this metaphor? Before it like grabs you or comes or...
I'm like, I want to do the metaphor.
You know what I mean? Like, yeah.
So you imagine like the wave, noticing it, like as it peaks, and you're noticing it. Okay, so and by noticing it, sometimes it doesn't have to like kind of come down because it can be.
Okay. Wow. All right. Okay. So yeah. No, I'm sure this is helpful to people. All right. Yeah. So.
All right, you just keep going, Joe, and I've just lost you completely.
No, I understand. I just think it's funny. So yeah, but I think a lot of people agree with you. It's probably a really good metaphor. I'm not too good at metaphors if you have to like visualize them. But anyway, so it's so interesting that anyone who starts on the conscious path just sees how the time it takes to realize what has happened, what is happening, what is about to happen is shortened.
Mm.
And that's just the work. There's nothing else. The time just gets shorter and shorter and shorter.
Yeah.
And any time that's shorter makes it easier to deal with. You can apologize faster if you know if you've done something stupid. The speed, your consciousness becomes faster and faster until it's eventually faster than the emotion itself.
Until you get to a point where you're about to do a certain behavior and you realize that you become aware of that before you're doing it.
Yeah.
And so then you just don't do that.
Yeah, and the interesting thing is, and this is something people have to learn, especially old school spiritual people have to understand this, is you don't have to stop yourself from doing bad things. When you become aware of something, if you could become aware that you're doing something bad, awareness is intelligent in itself, which means that when you become aware that you're doing something bad, you will stop by yourself. You don't need to control or discipline yourself. You don't need to avoid evil, because intelligence cannot do evil things. So...
Okay.
Wow. So
we're going to have to go into this. So
this is
what do you mean by this? Intelligence cannot do like bad things or evil things.
That's why the lowest spiritual paths have rules. The highest spiritual paths don't have rules, because they know that the rule is awareness, and awareness is intelligent. Intelligent prevents you from being bad. And there's a lot of layers to this. One interesting layer is if you put your hand on the hot stove, right? The instant you realize that your hand is on the stove, your body will remove your hand because it's burning.
Yeah.
And if you want to keep your hand on the stove anyway for whatever reason, or you want to go in an ice bath or whatever, you want to endure some pain, then you have to distract yourself because your body is literally trying to remove your hand because you're damaging your hand. So the body, and that is to say awareness, has an inbuilt intelligence. So if you're completely absorbed in something else and you don't notice your hand is burning, you're not going to move your hand. But the moment the pain is registered, your hand is already moving even before you realize it. So awareness
happens in the space it happens before the
awareness happens before thinking, but also awareness innately avoids that which is bad for you. And that's why awareness is such an interesting thing and such a miracle cure, because, for example, if you have negative thinking, you might think, oh, I got to be aware of my thoughts and I got to deal with my trauma, I got to do all kinds of things, whatever. But interestingly, you don't. All you have to do is become more aware.
More aware of the thoughts, or aware of the emotions.
More aware of what's happening. Yeah. If you find yourself thinking negatively, you can't keep doing it. Because what happens when you become aware of a negative thought, and you're like, oh, I'm so jealous, this person is an idiot, or whatever. When you see clearly that you are engaging in negativity, you feel in your body how this jealousy or anger or grudge, whatever it is negatively stressing your body, because believe me, it is directly injecting poisonous chemicals into you when you're thinking negatively.
Which is affecting your nervous system, which affects
and you can feel this. This is not something I make up. It comes as you become more aware of your body. So your intelligence says, stop this, you're poisoning yourself. And so then you stop it. So awareness is the miracle cure that fixes everything, because it has in itself, awareness is seeing, but it's not just seeing, it's also understanding. And another way we can prove that is, right now, if someone bangs a drum somewhere here, then even if I'm sitting here talking to you, when I hear that sound, I'll instantly know that it's a drum. I don't have to think about it. And if a bird sings right after, I'll know that it's a bird. And if I know something about birds, if 5 different birds sing, I'll know exactly which bird is singing.
But that happens in between the thinking, before the thinking.
It happens before the thinking. It's instant recognition, because awareness not only perceives, but it distinguishes. So that is to say, awareness not only sees, but it also understands. That is a part of awareness. So when you become aware, you not only become aware, you become wise. It is built into awareness. So that's why it's the only thing that is the one thing that is enough. You never need to do anything other than become aware. You could say that you need to accept also, but we say accept yourself, love yourself, but it's not entirely true. What we're saying is let go of judgment. Because awareness doesn't know anything about accepting or judging, it's just clear awareness. When you hear the bird singing, you don't have any opinion on it, it's just direct experience, right?
So you could say the pillar of what we're talking about right now is awareness.
Yeah.
And the direct experience of that.
Yeah.
Is everything. And then the other things kind of come around that, acceptance or action or...
They're secondaries, they're subsidiaries. For spirituality, there are only 2 paths. You can either enter through awareness or through love, devotion, faith, whatever you want to call it.
And that's going to be our next podcast.
That's going to be the next episode, yeah. So I talk a lot about the path of awareness because that's my path and it's your path. If awareness has never made sense to you, then you have to walk the path of faith, love, devotion, whatever you want to call it. And that's a different path.
But when you say if awareness doesn't make sense to you, how could it not make sense to you? Because that's just what we are all as human beings have the ability to. Well, we're just that is as being a human being. Isn't that just a part of us?
Well,
of course, you can go into different paths of that, but we all have this awareness. We all have this ability to notice, to kind of do what we're basically talking about today.
Well, it's a little bit, you can compare it to being introverted or extroverted. It's sort of the same thing. certain people, awareness is a self-referential practice. So awareness goes into yourself. Some people are just not interested in themselves in that way. They are interested in other people. So it's much easier for them to do something which has something to do with other people.
And that's where this love.
That's what love, devotion, and faith is about. It's about making another person, or God, or deity, or whatever, the object of your energy. So awareness, you make yourself the object, and you make your senses the object, or whatever. But if it's more natural for you to make someone else your object, then that's another way to do it. Because whether you fill yourself up with awareness or you fill yourself up with love, the result is the same. Your mind goes quiet, and after a while you recognize what you truly are. So the path is the same. It means to bring all your being into either awareness or into love. And then when the mind is so quiet that you can go hours without thoughts, then the mind, which cannot normally see itself, it experiences itself, and that's enlightenment. That's when you've always been seeing the world, but now you finally see what is seeing. You see what it is that's seeing. Because your soul is like your eye. If you imagine a world without mirrors, you can see everything, but you can't see your own eye. You can see other people's eyes, you can't see your own eye. So if you didn't have a mirror, you might not know that your eyes existed, yet you see everything. But if the world was completely empty, if there was nothing to see anywhere, then you might become aware of your own vision, because there's nothing to distract you, nothing to pull you away from the fact that you're seeing. And so in the same way, all spirituality is about having thoughts disappear, so much so that nothing can distract you from the fact that you are here. And then you can become aware of yourself. And since you're really invisible, your soul is like a window, right?
Right.
All right.
So now we're gone from this to invisible.
Right. So
and you need to like kind of slow down.
Your soul is like a window.
Yeah.
So let's imagine that I'm in a house, you're in a house, right? But we can only see the walls, so it's not very interesting. So we make a window, but we can't see through the window unless there's space. So we have space, but then all the bugs and everything come in, and that's not good. So we need some kind of way to look outside without anything be able to come in. So we have this glass panel. Now if the glass panel is completely clear, we can't actually see the window, but the window is this transparent material that allows us to look into the world, right? So a truly clean window cannot be seen, but it allows you to see the world outside your house. Your soul is stuck inside the house of your body. And for it to see the world, it must look through your senses. But your senses are transparent. You cannot see your eyes, you cannot hear your ears, you cannot taste your tongue, you cannot feel your feeler, whatever. You cannot smell your nose. All your senses are transparent so that you can see them. And the thing that observes your senses, if you have these 6 windows, which are your senses, or 5 windows, the one that sits in the middle and observes these windows cannot be seen either, because that is the one you see through. So
that is like the core one.
But if we imagine that outside these windows there was nothing, then if you were to look long enough, then it's possible you would become aware that there's glass, because there's nothing outside the window. The neighbors aren't walking by, there aren't cute couples walking past, birds flying, dogs, whatever. There's nothing outside the window. Then you might be aware that you're looking at a window, then you might be aware of the transparent material that the window is made of. So the big trick here in life, the culmination of spirituality, is to see the thing that you see through. And it has to be invisible, because if you could see yourself, then guess what would happen? There would be a big fat person in front of all your senses. You couldn't see anything. Like your vision would just have a person in it, which was you. If you were an object to yourself, you wouldn't be able to see, hear, or anything, because you would be in your way. So the only way for you to be able to see anything, you have to be transparent.
Yeah.
And because you're transparent, you don't notice yourself, and the world takes all your attention. You spend all your life running after things in the world, and you don't find yourself, and you feel something's missing. So spirituality is the quest for the spirit, and the spirit is not in this world in the way that anything else is. It's invisible. It's very hard to find. And that's why we use these methods of getting rid of distractions. And the only real distraction, you might think the world is a distraction, but the world is not really a distraction. But thinking is a distraction.
Big distraction.
Yeah. Because once thinking is gone, even if you look in the world, you're just really looking at your own mind. And so it's not difficult to realize yourself, but everything you see is just you.
How could I ever add anything to that, Caravan? He just, oh!
All right.
So I would love to kind of just say, like, whoever actually is able to kind of, how would you say, like, stomach that, or kind of take that in, then please just like write to us. Or just, we would love to hear your experience from that, actually, and what shifted it within you.
Yeah, we'd love
Because
to have more. We'd love to have more conversations with our community. We might have to find a better portal to do it through than our Facebook group. Maybe someone has a good idea of how we can do it. Maybe we need a website or something. But we'd love to have more interactions with our community, because we are people that love to talk to people. That's what we enjoy, right?
Yeah. But thank you for sharing that too. And that was.
Thank you for letting me rant.
That was an enlightening rant. And and I don't want to put any words more around it, because I'm like, I just want to give that space to kind of be, and for people listening to kind of just like replay that a few times and be like, okay,
let that sink in.
Yeah, let that sink in a bit. Yeah, but it's also experiencing that, like what you're talking about now. It's also being in your own experience in that, because you can talk about it. But actually to experience that from yourself, that's different, isn't it?
Yeah.
To have the direct experience of what you're talking or sharing or guiding.
You technically you cannot experience it. Technically, spirituality is a non-experience, but it's the only non-experience in the world. So in that way, it's very significant, and it's significant enough that you'll notice that you're experiencing nothing, because it's so different from ordinary experience. So because it's the only non-experience, that's what makes it experienceable. But it's not actually an experience. It's like
completely lost me too.
Well, it's like checking out for a few seconds, right? It's like when you fall asleep, except you're not falling asleep. Anyway, I think that's enough.
We've gone deep into that.
I think this is enough for this episode.
Yeah.
But spirituality is the hunt for the invisible. That's why it's so difficult. And anyone who tells you about the soul or the core or the true self or whatever, know that they don't know what they're talking about. If they're making it into an object, they have no idea what they're talking about.
But you said love and devotion. That's the
Love and Devotion is the title of our new reggae album that's coming out.
Because actually, if you didn't know this already, Caravan is actually very, very good with his guitar and music, and he sings. And and actually, we need to like share some of your recordings. It's maybe. It's very moving. Very moving.
Yeah, I'll bring my guitar next time. Anyway, I think that's enough shock and awe for one episode. So I think we'll call it here.
And we just wanted to kind of close off on a note of the importance of awareness, the importance of noticing, of observing your thoughts and emotions is absolutely the fundamental part of being human, but also like this path of like if you're challenged right now with any like a lot of issues in your life, and whether it's relationships, whether it's you're feeling down about yourself, whether you have some trauma, whatever that is, this awareness, this is really the pillar, the foundation, the core of moving through that, or living with that, or kind of being free of that thing. And so it's just kind of something to reiterate of the why to kind of to show up and keep working on yourself in this place, because this affects everything else in life, and it has in my life, and it has also, I believe, in your life too.
Oh yeah,
big time. And actually, I could no, I want to leave it at that. Actually, I was just going to leave it at that. Yeah. So yeah, really nice to be in person, Torben, and have this conversation. And there's a lot of energy and a lot of kind of I don't know what I'm talking about now. But thanks for being in this and sharing that.
Yeah, my pleasure, as always.
Yeah.
Well, that's it for
us.
the conversation close to the Yurt.